In the mid-2000s, when the prequel trilogy came out, the prequel Star Wars trilogy came out, if you thought that that trilogy of films was going to be the most divisive trilogy of films in the entire Star Wars saga, well, welcome to 2020, where that crown has been very, very quickly obtained by
Indeed.
the sequel trilogy of films.
By the way, you got your dates wrong. It was the late 90s to the early mid-2000s.
No, I said if you thought by the mid-2000s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there you go. Wow, way to ruin my intro.
Sorry.
You ruined my intro. What's up, guys? Today we are going to talk about the sequel Star Wars trilogy, the Disney trilogy of movies.
Yep.
We're not
only the main trilogy.
Yeah, only the main. We're not going to talk about Rogue One, which I love Rogue One. I would love to talk about that sometime, and we're not going to talk about Solo
because we said quite enough about that.
Yeah,
last
we've said.
time.
Oh yeah, we did do a review of Solo, but we wanted to talk about the sequel trilogy because basically the sequel trilogy kind of just wrapped up as of December, and it just recently came out on DVD and Blu-ray and all that stuff, and it's been hitting streaming platforms. So, I don't know about you, but I wanted to really have a fresh look at...
Me too.
Kind of through a different lens of the whole sequel trilogy. So, what we decided to do was we decided that we would watch each movie back to back, and we did it over the span of 3 nights.
Because we hadn't really seen any of the movies in rapid succession like that to kind of get a sense of how the trilogy flowed together and stuff like that.
Yeah, and in particular with the newer movie, the newest movie, Rise of Skywalker, we had only seen it once, so we wanted to make sure that we weren't just colored by, things like nostalgia. It's a very nostalgic film and all this other stuff.
Yeah, and the excitement of going
to the theater and seeing and all that. So we wanted to really make sure we sat down and kind of have a sort of objective, critical perspective of the sequul trilogy, because
I feel like we can't possibly be objective, but yes.
As objective as we can, trying to look at it as objectively as we can. But that being said, we decided that we would do that, and then we wanted to put our thoughts down as far as what we actually thought of the sequel trilogy.
Yeah. About each movie and then the trilogy as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of stuff, especially with the last 2 films in the sequel trilogy, that has gone around the internet. There's a lot of political crap that gets thrown in there. I'm just saying this right up front. We're not going that direction with this video. We're just trying to look at the films themselves and, how they were made, how the story is, how the characters are,
how they
all
are
of that.
Also as Star Wars films. And
how they are as
Star Wars films.
Right, how they fit into the overall Star Wars universe, and just kind of our thoughts on that. And you and I are both, as many of you guys on the channel know, huge Star Wars fans. The original trilogy and the prequels were a big part of my childhood. I adore a lot of those films, especially the original trilogy. And by the way, we kind of have a fresh perspective on those too, because, what was it, a couple months ago we watched the original trilogy again?
Yep.
And she owns the original versions of the original trilogy, the theatrical releases.
I'm a lucky
lady. I'm a lucky dude for marrying into that,
That's why you married me.
Yeah. So
pre-special edition is what we're talking here.
Pre-special editions and all that nonsense that they added to it. So we actually had kind of a refresher on that. So I think a little bit of, at least my opinion, I could say, is a little colored on that, having just watched those as well.
Well, you can't help but compare the new movies to the original Star Wars, because that was what Star Wars was.
That's where it all began. So, that being said, guys, we are today going to talk about Disney's sequel Skywalker trilogy saga, whatever you want to call it, the sequel trilogy. So, how we're going to do this is we're going to talk about each movie individually, and then just kind of maybe rank them and give our overall opinions on it, and just talk about
the trilogy as a whole. I would like to do as well.
So, let's talk about, first of all, The Force Awakens, which came out in late 2015. Now, we have to I think we both need to be up front here a little bit.
Well, I was going to touch on this, but
go ahead. No, go ahead. I haven't shut up.
I was going to say you can never separate nostalgia from things, you just can't. So nostalgia colors my opinion of The Force Awakens, because Rob and I saw it as our very first date ever.
Yep.
And it was an awesome date. It was great. And I also expected nothing from that movie. I was like, I've been burned by the prequels. I expect nothing from this. I barely even want to see it. I was just kind of seeing it for the heck of it. And then I loved it. It like really exceeded my expectations. So yeah, like there's nostalgia and stuff. But watching it again, I still like it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd have to say so too.
And I still think it's a good movie.
I'm glad you said that up front because we have a little bit of I would say bias about it because there is a lot of good feels with that movie for us because again it was our first date and we've been together now for almost 5 years. Wow. So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Our first date. So The Force Awakens, I think. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of the issues with The Force Awakens, and I don't have too many, but I'll say for me personally, first, number one, I think it's a fair criticism to say that a lot of people make about The Force Awakens, and it's the big one, that it's too much like A New Hope.
I feel like that's kind of the main criticism, and I get where you're coming from, but I also didn't really care that much. Like, I didn't really mind. Yeah. Because I thought it was different in its own way in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and also, like, the similarities were comfy, and they were, like, you could argue they maybe were a little too safe, but they kind of harken back to a lot of the original trilogy. Mm-hmm. And, of course, there's so many echoes of the original, of, like, A New Hope. Just an example, you know, it starts off at Jakku, a desert planet, you know. It starts with a droid carrying a message, you know. You know, the scene between Han and Kylo Ren could very much be both, it eclipses both, I would say.
Like his Han Solo's, spoiler alert, Han Solo's death scene?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it kind of harkens back to two scenes from the original trilogy, and that would be the scene between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in A New Hope, and the scene between Darth Vader and Luke at the end of Empire. So it kind of has that feel to it as well.
To me, I feel like it's more reminiscent of Obi-Wan's death because it's like the newly found kind of father figure of the main protagonist.
Yeah,
and then they die.
True. Yeah, so I think it kind of parallels both. But so those are just some of the ways that it's sort of similar to like the original trilogy and kind of harkens back to those things. And then there's kind of
like a Death Star-esque thing at the end, and they, you know, there's an attack on it, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
However...
that being said, I think the movie still has a lot of
its own.
A lot of its own, you know, unique moments in it.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as what other issues did you have with Force Awakens? Would you say?
To be honest, I didn't really have a lot of issues with it. I liked it a lot.
I think honestly,
I don't have a lot to say about it. To be honest,
I think the like the fact that that it's a little too much like the original trilogy is definitely something. And
oh wait, I do have something.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
This is a criticism of all movies and of like a lot of movies these days. And yes, I'm making myself sound like a grandma right now, but it's so fast paced, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes movies could benefit from just allowing certain quiet moments to marinate a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And that movie didn't really do that. Like The Force Awakens was like one brief touching moment. Oh my god, a bunch of action, let's move on immediately, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, that's a bit of a criticism with the whole trilogy.
And aside from, I would argue maybe Finn, Rey, and Kylo Ren, they didn't really expand too much, or, like, really delve too much into the other characters, the new characters.
Yeah. Well, I really liked those three. I like them a lot.
I do too, yeah, but I'm just saying, like, there's Poe, there's a few other characters. And so, I mean, that would be like a small little thing. But overall, and I would agree with you, and this could be just personal opinion between us, like, I'm not really a huge Marvel fan or a lot of the movies like that. It is a personal critique of movies from that, or of this generation, I guess you could say. And you're absolutely right that they're so incredibly fast-paced sometimes that it's a little jarring.
It's like a big action-adventure thing. Like Jurassic Park was like it. I'm getting off on, or Jurassic World on a tangent here. The new Star Trek films, etc.
Yep,
it's just a thing these days, you know.
All the Marvel films, all of them.
Definitely.
So those are like a couple of our main critiques with it.
One more.
Go ahead.
Snoke. I can't even pinpoint anything that's particularly wrong with him. I just find him so dorky. Like, first of all, why did they even choose the name Snoke?
Yeah, it's weird.
And second of all, who the heck is he? And third of all, why is he bad CGI, you know?
As far as other praises of the film, I would say that I think the narrative is pretty strong. I would say that the visuals are fantastic. Certainly better than probably any of the other movies before it, anyway. Although I will argue that the original trilogy has its charm. in the fact just those I love those primitive practical effects and stuff like that. But I mean, objectively speaking, I think that The Force Awakens has some amazing visuals.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess that's pretty much what I have. Like I said, I like for the most part the new cast. I like the new cast, the scenes with like Han Solo and Chewbacca and Leia. I would have liked to have had more Luke. I do recall being a little disappointed by that Luke is literally only in the last like 30 seconds of the film. But it wasn't such a, like, to me it wasn't such a, you know, monumental loss that it took away from the film. I thought the film was good. Yeah.
I really didn't care about that. And also, like, I like that the new or the old cast is in the movies.
Yeah.
But I like that they didn't dominate the movies, you know? Because the story, they're kind of just periphery characters, you know? The stories aren't, of all three movies, aren't supposed to be about them. Yeah. So I kind of liked that they made the new characters the main characters.
And I'm gonna say, at least, now, again, from the standpoint of us just going into The Force Awakens, not talking about the next two films yet, I think it at the time, it was the strongest Star Wars movie since the original trilogy.
I agree. I still feel that way.
Personally. I would say my exception now would be Rogue One. I think I liked Rogue One a lot more than it, but The Force Awakens was really, really great. As far as just the 9 main Skywalker saga, as they call them, films, it's the 4th best, in my opinion.
Also, I want to add, sorry, keep jumping in here. Another thing I liked about the movie is I thought it was, you know, funny.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
It was comical.
Sometimes the humor felt throughout this whole to me this is a complaint throughout the whole trilogy, the sequel trilogy. Some of the humor felt a little misplaced and kind of awkward.
I agree with that.
But there are funny stuff, like when Finn says, "Oh, we'll use the Force," and Han just goes, "That's not how the Force works." You know, that was a really funny line. Yeah, there's a couple things like that, but sometimes it felt a little, you know, kind of hokey and out of place.
I agree, and it's a bit much, and yes, some people will be like, "Oh, well, the original series had corny humor too." Yes, it did, but like I feel like, once again, to sound like a curmudgeon who's not with the times, I feel like it's another thing about new movies. There's like a certain type of humor that I've noticed is in all the Star Wars movies, and like I watched some of those Marvel movies with our friend Matt, and like it's the same humor. It's kind of like they step outside of the character of the story for a minute, and like it's this out of, you know, like the tone just totally different.
It's like they're stepping out of the situation and commenting on it.
It's like almost like they're making fun of the story. As
it kind of jars the narrative a little bit. Like they do that a lot in Guardians of the Galaxy, and it works in Guardians of the Galaxy because those films are over the top, but it's sort of misplaced sometimes in Star Wars, I feel, but that could just be a personal opinion as well. I feel
the same way, yeah.
But objectively speaking, trying to look at it objectively, I really do feel like The Force Awakens is a pretty strong Star Wars film. Is it the most original Star Wars film? No, that's probably its biggest. That's probably its Achilles heel, but I really don't think it takes too much away from the movie.
Agreed.
Now, let's move on to The Last Jedi, which is where the problems begin.
Yeah, I feel like you and I both have a lot more to say about these next two films.
Yes, we do. So, for both of us, the next two films we weren't nearly as familiar with, because I think we've watched The Force Awakens a good amount now.
About 3 times.
I'd say I've seen The Last Jedi. No, I think I've seen Force Awakens maybe 4 or 5 times. I've seen The Last Jedi maybe 3 times.
Oh, I thought we were talking about The Last Jedi.
Yeah, yes. And then we've only seen Rise of Skywalker twice. So again, keep that in mind as well based on this review. But especially this viewing of it is where I really was starting to notice some of the big issues with The Last Jedi.
Totally.
When we first went and saw The Last Jedi, I recall liking it at the theater and coming out and it was like, I think that might even have... I think I said something like that was at least as good as The Force Awakens, if not better. I have to see it again. I totally do not feel that way anymore.
My first impression was that, sorry to cut you off, was like, I was a little disappointed by it even from the beginning. Yeah. But I still think it's an entertaining film. It's just like, why didn't they do more? Like, way more with it? Yeah. Why wasn't the story a lot better? Like, I just don't understand why they did what they did, really.
The unfortunate thing about The Last Jedi is that it should have been so much better than it was.
Yeah, that's my issue. It's like, it was okay, but...
There were so many weird arcs in that movie. Like,
totally.
Like, character arcs, different, like, weird decisions they made with the plot that I didn't really like. And I saw a quote somewhere about how it's something like how subversion is genius. I'm sorry, that is not the case in The Last Jedi.
Yeah, it depends on, like... The the context. Subversion is not always genius.
Yeah.
You know?
And I know that, like, critically, it's probably the most polarizing film in the entire franchise since it's been released because of the incredible backlash it's gotten from fans, and then it's also had its, like, stark defenders, especially with, like, professional, movie review sites and critics and stuff. They kind of, like, for lack of a better term, shill the film a little bit.
Whereas everyone hates The Rise of Skywalker. No,
it seems like everybody does.
I think the Last Jedi is the worst of the three. But anyway,
I would agree that The Last Jedi is the worst of the three. And my biggest question when looking at The Last Jedi is, why did they let one man direct the film and write the film? They had 3 writers on The Force Awakens. Why did they give Rian Johnson almost total control of that film? I don't understand.
I don't understand the details of it, but I don't understand why they wouldn't have the same writers for the entire trilogy.
Yeah, I don't know what happened behind the scenes there. Like if maybe those writers moved on or they couldn't get him or they wanted to have a different... I don't know.
But it would make sense because, well, I won't get into this too much right now because it's an overall series thing, but there's no cohesiveness between all the movies. Like, you could tell it was done by different writers that all had different ideas about where they wanted the story to go.
And you could tell that they really had no plan from the beginning as to, point A, point B, point C. You would think they would have structured the trilogy as much like how you would structure any kind of narrative, beginning, middle, end. You have a perfect beginning, middle, end in 3 films. But they didn't. It's like they went into it blind. It was a very odd decision, and that very much comes across, especially starting with The Last Jedi. So
they're kind of like, as this one person I know said, they're a hot mess.
Yes, they are a hot mess.
I feel like that sums it up well,
Let's go. We're going to like the trilogy as a whole again. I want to talk about just The Last Jedi, and I want to talk about some of the issues that I personally have with it, and then if you want to as well.
Okay.
My number 1 issue with The Last Jedi that I hate. It is my most hated scene in, I think, the entire Star Wars saga, is when Leia is thrust out into space and, having shown almost no Force powers up until then, somehow manages to escape, reach out and, go back to the ship and float around, and they, save her, and she lives through, being sucked into a vacuum into outer space. Yeah. I hate that scene.
And have they ever shown the Force as working in that way? Like, you can kind of teleport yourself through space like that, especially as, they show that she's freezing.
Yes.
And then somehow she's still able to, hold out her hand and, Yep.
This is another big issue I have with this film and the following film, is that it seems like they were just I guess the Force can do that, so what the heck? We'll just write it in,
They're just making up a lot of rules.
And it doesn't, even with the prequel trilogy, there was nothing that they really did with the Force. I never had a moment where I was like, oh, the Force can't do that, But I've had that many times in the sequel trilogy. It's like they didn't even. It's almost like they didn't do the research on the lore, or I mean, you have the best resource available, which is George Lucas. You'd think George Lucas would have been like, no, Leia can't do that. If you do that, she's going to die,
Well, two things. Firstly, I think they probably don't really care too much about what George Lucas thinks. That's my guess.
True, yeah.
Number 2, I think it's not that they didn't probably know the previous lore. It's probably they just decided to make their own rules, It's
which...
Now the Force can make you, give you the ability to heal.
Yeah, which happens in Rise of Skywalker and all that. So there was moments like that in this film where I was just especially the moment with Leia. And the big problem, too, with Leia is, like I said, they don't really show... you have hints, the famous line from Return of the Jedi... I know, somehow I've always known, she's quote-unquote Force-sensitive.
Yeah.
But they never showed her wielding a lightsaber or using some, lifting something with the Force or doing any of that.
And in fact...
Until this film.
And in fact, the movie's called The Last Jedi. And
it's
supposed to be Luke Skywalker who's the Last Jedi, so doesn't that seem directly contradictory? It's if Luke is the Last Jedi, how can Leia also use the Force, but we're not calling her a Jedi?
Yeah.
I just find it really confusing.
Yeah, and so, okay, so you say, again, back to the famous line from Empire Strikes Back, that boy is our last hope. No, there is another. Okay, so that being said, if there is another, even if we didn't know up until this point, which apparently we do know up until this point, that Leia does have Jedi powers. She has the potential to. So if she's a Skywalker, technically, and she is Force sensitive and she could use the Force, again, how the hell is it The Last Jedi?
I mean, you could argue that because in the third movie they say that she gave up her lightsaber because she felt like if she completed, like, kept going with it, like, it had something to do with Ben going evil, so, like, she gave her lightsaber to Luke. There was a scene saying that.
Yeah, but that didn't happen until the third film, so it didn't make any sense in the context of the second film, having only seen the second film before the third was released.
And she obviously still has really powerful Force abilities, so, like, she obviously has Jedi powers.
It's just weird, it kind of doesn't make sense, and just not very consistent, and I don't know, I think it feels strange. Yeah. The second thing that really bothers me about this film is the one 4-letter word, starts with an F, fuel. Since when has fuel been an issue in Star Wars ever? Like, ever. When? And it becomes such an important plot point. They're stuck in, like, the tractor beam by the First Order because they're low on fuel and they can't escape. What else? There's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's a whole bunch of scenes or moments in this movie where they're like, oh, our fuel reserves are only at this %, or we can't make it because we don't have enough fuel, or we got to go here and refuel. It's the first Star Wars ever that they talked about fuel somehow being a factor. You know, we were talking about the one night right after this, and we were kind of laughing about it. How many times in the original trilogy did the Falcon just, like, go all over the place the entire movie, and fuel was never mentioned once?
Yeah, and they... sorry to interrupt you, but they did mention in the movie at some point that, like, them going to light speed or whatever, like, used a bunch of fuel, and it's like... Later, when we were watching The Rise of Skywalker, there were ships going into light speed all over the place, and we're like, uh-oh, they better watch out, for their fuel.
Yeah, there were light speed skipping, where he kept doing that,
Yes.
And we looked at each other, we were laughing, we're like, oh, hopefully they don't run out of fuel.
And also, if they were gathering all their resources and leaving that planet to escape the First Order, who somehow found out that they were there at the beginning of the film, we don't know how that happened, which is okay. They didn't think to fuel their vehicles or, like, take as much fuel as they possibly had. Like, maybe they didn't have a lot on that planet, maybe, but it just seemed kind of dorky.
The whole thing just comes off really contrived, and it's like, did you not have any other ideas for an entire film? I mean, almost the entire film, they're just kind of stuck in limbo with the First Order. And then it's like, then I wonder, it's like, also, how did Finn and Rose escape to go on that stupid casino planet?
They did touch on that.
They touched on it slightly,
yeah. They said that, like, because then later other ships were breaking off from the main ship, and they did mention that, like, the Star Destroyers weren't worried about, like, little tiny ships.
The little ships, they were off the main ship. Yeah. Right, but even that seemed like a really silly way.
I know, it's
to
like,
just
why wouldn't you be worried about that?
And you have an entire fleet. You can't send send TIE fighters out. Yeah,
and it's like, do you think those people are leaving to go on a joyride? Obviously, they're leaving because they've got some kind of plan to try to thwart you. So go kill the tiny ships that are escaping.
It doesn't make any sense. And that whole plot, that whole arc with Rose and Finn, where they go to that casino planet. So boring, so flat. I hated that planet. Yeah. I don't even understand what the whole point of that whole arc was. It just seemed like they were trying to fill in time.
Well, that's kind of, I wanted to touch on that as one of my main criticisms. Because, I didn't really enjoy that arc. It wasn't that great. It was okay. Yeah. I liked seeing those animals escape. Although a lot of people apparently hate Rose for that, because they're like, oh, those kids are going to get beaten, and didn't she think about that? And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? You're just finding a reason to hate that character. But anyway... Yeah. I think they just wanted Finn to have a story arc and couldn't figure out any other way to do it. Yeah. But when you think about it, that did nothing to further the plot. Like, nothing.
Or his character, really.
Nothing, yeah.
It did nothing at all, yeah. I mean, and it ends up, they go there to get a Codebreaker dude, right? And then, so they get the Codebreaker dude, they show up back on the ship, they bust in, and they're going to infiltrate it and do all this stuff, and they're going to be able to stop the tractor beam so the fleet can get away. And then they get caught. And then the guy just leaves, and you never see that guy again. I forget the character's name. You just never see him again. He leaves. So that whole part was just pointless.
It was pointless.
There was no point to it. Well, why even have that arc? Why couldn't they have Finn do something? It was just
I guess
really
you could
weird.
argue that in real life not everything works out, but it's a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, it's a Star Wars movie. Yeah, and I don't know if they were trying to make a point where it's like, I also really didn't like the dynamic between Poe and Laura Dern's character. I can't think of the character's name.
I wanted to talk about that too. Yeah.
That also seemed kind of contrived. They kind of made Poe unlikable, which seemed like a weird choice because Poe is supposed to be like one of the main 3 characters.
I hated that whole thing. It's like, why is he so combative with this woman? Why is he so annoying? Like, somebody just punch him.
And Laura Dern's character, first of all, she'll always be Ellie Sattler from Jurassic Park to me. But that aside, her character was okay, but when she did that, during her death scene, when she, basically aimed that ship at the First Order fleet and did that, it was cool, but it was supposed to be some impactful death scene, and I just didn't really care about her character, so it really didn't matter to me.
Also, I thought they had no fuel, so how did she go into light speed at the end?
Oh, and not just that. Not only did they have no fuel, but their remaining fuel before she did that, they transferred to the transporters, so the rest of them could get away to escape to that planet. How did she have enough fuel to skip to light speed? It made no sense.
Unless she saved just enough, knowing
she must have had just enough for one more light speed skip. Or no, sorry, not light speed skip, which is also another stupid thing, by the way.
It was stupid. And also, with the Laura Dern thing, yes, Poe was being ridiculously annoying, but why didn't Laura Dern's character simply explain what her plan was?
Yeah, why?
And then that whole plot point, that whole side plot with Poe just would have been over.
Yeah, Laura Dern's character was just kind of like...
She's like, yeah, exactly.
she was like, I don't like your attitude. She kept having that weird smirk. And I loved Laura Dern, like I said, Ellie Sattler in Jurassic Park.
I was okay with that character,
I think if that character wasn't played by Laura Dern, I wouldn't really have anything at all that I cared about.
I liked her hair.
Purple hair, that's cool. Yeah, that was cool.
Oh, also Admiral Ackbar's unremarkable death. Everyone hates that, and Rob really hates that.
I hate that. I know you don't really care as much.
Well, it's sad, but it is
I think somebody made a video on YouTube, which is great, where they replaced Laura Dern's character with Admiral Ackbar, and he does that scene, and I was like, okay, that would have been kind of badass, to see him go out. But they just kind of casually kill Admiral Ackbar, which, maybe you could say, well, that's kind of stupid, but it just seemed kind of to me, it bothered me in a way, because it kind of seems like, again, this whole subversion crap, it's like, oh, we're going to subvert everyone's expectations, we're just going to randomly kill Admiral Ackbar and not really say much about it, and it's like, that's kind of annoying, he's a legacy character, and he never really had a huge role in the original trilogy, but he's a very beloved character by a lot of people.
He's really not a big character, and he never was, but they should have given him a bit more of a moment.
Yeah, they should have given him a bit more of something, but I don't know. Yeah. That one almost felt like a middle finger to the fans slightly, to me, which is why I didn't like it, but I don't know.
Go ahead.
The one thing I was going to say do you have any more cons?
I did want to do some cons relating to Kylo Ren.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So, what the heck is with Kylo Ren? I love his character, but he becomes, in this movie, very confusing, and his motivations are hard to understand, in my opinion. So there was the conflict between good and evil in the first one. Evil kind of won, blah, blah, blah. But in this one, then he decides to help Rey for some reason. Mm-hmm. I can't remember why he did that. Maybe he just didn't like Snoke, or I don't know. They
didn't really give a very good reason. It's because Snoke set up that link between them. Mm-hmm. They sort of started talking and bonding more, and then you find out the truth about... Actually, I liked that part where you kind of... I wanted to say as one of my pros, I'm going to acknowledge this just because we got to this. A lot of people don't like Luke's portrayal in this movie. I actually thought that was one of the stronger parts of the movie.
Do you mind if we get into that more elaborately later?
Yeah, but go ahead.
Okay, so, because I've got comments about Luke as well.
Okay, go ahead.
So then he helps Rey for some reason. Kills Snoke, then he's like, forget the First Order. forget the Resistance, forget it all.
Yeah, leave it all behind.
Yeah, it's like, let's forget this whole good and evil paradigm.
Leave the past behind.
Then he's like, join me, Rey. And she's like, no. And he's like, now I am the new leader of the
Supreme Leader,
the Supreme Leader. So it's like, he decided to abandon the good versus evil thing, but then he decided to be evil and go after the Resistance again, like 2 seconds later. Like, why?
It really didn't make any sense.
It did not make any sense.
It was weird. It was a very weird choice.
I feel like really it was that Rian Johnson was like, okay, this Snoke dude is really dorky, let's kill him off.
He couldn't even come up with a creative way to kill him off.
I mean, his death scene was cool, but...
That whole scene, yes, is really cool. When they're there and then, they...
The Red Room with the Red
Red Room and then they fight all the Red Guards. I actually really like that scene, but how they got there was a bit... little kind of...
It was confusing.
Weird.
But I wasn't sad to see Snoke go.
I wasn't either, actually. I didn't really... Like, he was okay.
He was just flat.
Yeah, I agree. He was kind of flat, yeah. There's a lot of characters, unfortunately, in the sequel trilogy that are just quite flat. Like, I know a lot of people hate Rose. I don't hate her, but she's flat. Like, I feel nothing for Rose.
I agree.
She's just so flat. Like, I know that on the opposite end, I saw an article, it was like, by downplaying Rose's role in, they didn't do Rose justice in Rise of Skywalker because they downplayed her role. It's like, I was fine with it. She wasn't that interesting in the beginning anyway.
I think what made that kind of a shame, I don't care about Rose's character either way, but what made that kind of a shame, and we won't get too, into this, but...
Well, just that she was getting harassed by people.
Well, that's
like
bad.
The actress, which sucked.
But also, I think they only reduced her role because so many people hated her, and a lot of the reasons people hated her I thought were kind of stupid. Yeah. Because people were like, they wanted to represent people of that particular race, and... Yeah. She's not conventionally attractive,
Although the blind Asian guy from Rogue One was a badass. He was cool. He was really badass.
Well, it really doesn't matter what a race is, but I think that was a critique that some people had.
Which, by the way, is a really stupid critique. Like, who cares?
Totally, it's stupid.
But she ended up kind of becoming the Jar Jar of the sequel trilogy. Just that everybody hated her.
I know, I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't really get it either. But then again, I'm also a person that likes Jar Jar, so what can I say?
Well, that's not what I'm saying. Well, I hated Jar Jar too, but I just don't understand how she's considered that caliber of annoying.
I know what you're saying. But did you have any other cons for The Last Jedi?
Well, the scene at the end with Luke I thought was so cool, but it was another moment of, does the Force work that way,
Yeah, that was another thing. It's like,
but
wait
I really
a minute.
Liked the scene.
It's like, how did Luke make like a weird carbon copy of himself and
that looked human?
And he was younger. It was weird. I didn't really get that.
Nonetheless, it was cool.
It was definitely very cool, but again, also felt slightly contrived. Like, okay, they just made up their own rules about how the Force works. Like, it's not like... It's almost like he became a Force ghost without dying. It was really weird.
It was odd. Anyway, let's go on to pros, I guess.
I have a couple pros. As I was going on, I actually did like the narrative between Rey and Luke.
Me too.
And that was actually nice because it did slow the film down a little bit because I thought...
Yeah.
Which, as again, we've talked about it being really fast-paced.
Yeah, it wasn't
Unfortunately, like... It's weird that the more fast-paced stuff was more tedious, I guess. Like, again, the whole casino area was really not very good and some of that. I loved almost all the battle scenes, especially the one at the end.
I liked it too.
With the red sand, or the
mineral
salt, the salt planet. I love the porgs. I love the crystal foxes.
The porgs,
like the little creatures throughout the whole thing is really great. I love the scene with Yoda. That was really, really good. That was
awesome. I love that.
That was a really awesome scene. And it opens up with a space battle, and it starts out badass until the fuel thing comes in. And then I'm like, ugh. And then the Leia thing comes in, and I'm like, ugh. So it has its moments for sure. There are some really good scenes from it. And visually, again, it all looks awesome. But, it's just... it's got a lot of problems,
I want to touch a little bit more on Luke and why I like the Luke stuff. I know a lot of people didn't.
Sure.
But I know a lot of people hated that he had kind of given up and thrown in the towel. But I don't know. I felt like it was understandable that he did, given like the backstory with Ben. And everyone's like, oh, he was just hiding out on this planet, which is reminiscent of Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi, who just hid out for decades, letting the Empire run the show. So it's no different than that, and I don't know why people expect Luke to be this larger-than-life, not human character who is infallible. You know?
Yeah, and he was quite flawed in the original trilogy. You know, even after he became a Jedi, you know, he still wasn't, you know, there were moments between him and Darth Vader, you know, where he almost looks kind of conflicted too. And he by no means is a perfect character, and I like that. I like that too about him. I like that he kind of went into solitude and pulled a Yoda, yeah.
I liked it too. Question: what did you think about the weird kind of connection between Kylo Ren and Rey?
That was the other thing that I kind of liked, actually. That one, again, it has a little bit of that, you know, can this really happen with the Force? But I also liked it.
It definitely does, yeah.
Because it kind of, I don't know. I think it was I just like the dynamic between them and how they kind of it kind of builds on both of their characters a little bit. You could really see how it kind of pulls Ben away from the dark side towards the light, and how it kind of pulls Rey closer to the dark side a little bit, and leaves them both conflicted. I don't know, and I just like the dynamic between them. I thought it was pretty good.
I thought those parts were interesting too. Yeah,
they were interesting enough.
Although it was kind of like, how is this working?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also that scene where Kylo Ren was randomly topless was so weird.
Yeah, it was just odd.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
It's kind of funny though.
But yeah, overall, The Last Jedi, I would say, it's just got problems, man. Like, I hate to say it. It visually a good film. There were parts about it that I really liked, but this is really where the problems kind of came into like full fruition, and a lot of these would carry over, unfortunately, into Rise of Skywalker, which we can talk about now if you'd like.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I hope we didn't go on about that too long. I had a lot to say.
That's right. I had a lot to say too.
And I will about this film too. Yeah. Okay. Are we starting with cons or pros?
Let's start with cons. I think we did that with The Last Jedi too.
Okay. So, my biggest problem with the film, if I had to summarize it overall, is that it doesn't make any sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I didn't get so much of what happened plot-wise, why it was happening, why the characters were doing what they were doing, how any of it made sense, you know?
Yep.
Probably, like, one of the most annoying things that's coming to mind right now is Leia's death.
Yeah.
And I feel like, really, they made her die because, you know, Carrie Fisher died, unfortunately.
Right.
So they wanted to write her out of the story. But, like, it made no sense, and, like, I was talking with you about this and we couldn't figure it out. I was talking with my friend Carly about it, and we were both theorizing why she died. And if you have to theorize because it makes that little sense, then there's a problem, you know?
Yeah, like I said, even the prequels didn't have this problem where you had, you know, despite everybody, like, complaining and bitching about the prequels all the time, there were, like, at least
it made sense.
Yeah, at least, right, exactly. It made sense. I didn't have moments where I'm scratching my head going, like, wait, can they do that? You know, like, and why did that happen? You know?
Like, with Leia's death, it was like, did she die because she never fully recovered from going out into space? Did she die because she has a link with Kylo Ren somehow when he got stabbed? Like, why? You know? And why did she reach out to Ben in that moment?
Yeah.
And how did that random orange lady know that she had only the strength left to reach out to Ben once and then die? You know?
I was going to say that, yeah. They don't really explain anything with her. I can't remember her name right now.
I forget her name too.
You guys know
the goggles, who she is.
Yeah, what's her name? Is it like...
whatever.
I can't remember her name, and I don't want to butcher it. But yeah, how does she... And that happened a little bit in The Force Awakens too. It's like, how does she know... She even says in The Force Awakens, she's like, I'm no Jedi. It's like, how does she know what's going on?
I know, and who was she saying it to?
Yeah.
Was there anyone else there, or was she just saying it to, like, into space?
She was exhibitioning, yeah. There was a lot of exhibitioning in this film, which was a problem.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I will say that The Rise of Skywalker did do a good job at kind of making sense of some of the nonsense and, like, the very confusing things in The Last Jedi. True. But the problem was, I was left with even more questions, even after those ones.
Yeah.
Some of those were resolved. Like, for example, I liked that they showed the flashback scene between Luke and Leia, where he's training her.
Yeah, they explained a lot more about Leia.
And so, after seeing that, it's like, okay, now it makes sense, the stuff in The Last Jedi that I didn't like about, you know, with Leia and the Force and stuff. Although it's still contrived, I'm sorry, but it sucks that they had to use that scene to explain something that happened in the last movie.
Yeah.
And that sucks that they had to do that. Palpatine, I was really, really happy to see Palpatine come back, but that also felt like a little contrived. It was kind of like, well, it's like some of these, like Snoke and everything, and all the things that Kylo Ren is hearing, it's like, I am every voice you've ever heard in your head, and it turns into Vader's voice, which is cool and all that, but it also felt like, again, slightly contrived and just kind of a simple way to kind of explain some of the nonsense that happened in The Last Jedi,
Yeah, I was indifferent to the whole Palpatine thing, but it did feel like they were like, uh-oh, Rian Johnson killed Snoke, what the heck are we going to do?
Yeah.
And we don't think that Kylo Ren's going to be an adequate end villain. What the heck do we do? Bring Palpatine back, That's kind of how it felt to me, but at the same time, I really didn't mind him, and the ending part with him was satisfying.
Yeah.
And I really didn't care that Rey was a Palpatine, but I kind of liked her better as just the child of nobody, personally.
Yeah. Yeah, I was the Rey Palpatine thing was kind of like, I didn't feel like, oh, she's a Palpatine. I was just kind of like, oh, they did that,
Yeah, I was like,
Like, it's like, it's okay, it's, again, though, the
wasn't necessary.
The memes that followed, though, where it's like, Palpy slapping them cheeks was really funny.
I know, it made it worth it, honestly.
Like, in a way, I'm happy, because now we have, like, an entire speculation of who Palpatine banged, and, like, somebody figured out that, like, I guess based on the timeline of their ages and stuff, that would have had been, like, post him being, like, all, changing, being all deformed and everything. Revenge of the Sith, in Revenge of the Sith, so that's kind of funny.
Yes, it is.
But, yeah, it's just very weird.
Yeah.
But it kind of did, again, like you said, feel contrived. And I think the only reason that I think they kind of get away with it a little bit is because it's Palpatine, and Palpatine's awesome.
And then the other thing with Palpatine is, like, if he just used Snoke as, like, this random puppet figurehead, why? Why not just come out as Palpatine? What was the point of Snoke? You know what I mean?
The container of Snoke heads, remember that?
Oh yeah, we were in like tears of laughter talking about this. We're like, why in Palpatine's lair there, on whatever the name of that planet was, did he have multiple Snoke heads in a jar? It's like, yeah, they were trying to show that Snoke was just a puppet, but why does he need more than one of them, The backup Snokes.
Oh god.
So that was funny.
Yeah, it was funny.
But just stupid.
What else? I'm trying to think of some other problems with that film.
Well, the whole Finn saying that he's force sensitive thing.
I got something to tell you, and then it's like, you find out it's that he's force sensitive. It's like, really?
Well, I think that didn't even come up in the movie. Didn't they say after the fact that what he wanted to tell Rey was that he was force sensitive? It's like, so you think you're gonna die in quicksand, and what you want to yell to Rey is, I'm force sensitive! You want those to be your last words? Also, I thought it was weird that they, at the beginning of the series, had them very obviously, like, into each other and falling in love.
Yeah, especially in the first movie, yeah.
And then they just kind of dropped it. Like, I get sometimes people stop being into each other, but it was weird that they just shifted it without any kind of showing any change in their relationship.
Yeah, and then suddenly it was like it was like Ben Solo and her.
Which I didn't really see any kind of build up to that. It just kind of happened.
Except for the shirtless scene from The Last Jedi.
True, but that didn't have a romantic vibe to it. I think it was just supposed to be funny. Yeah. Not that I hated that they kissed at the end. I was kind of like, oh, I did not expect that.
Yeah, it was. It definitely had some problems, I have to say. Like the
Why did Chewbacca get a medal at the end, for example?
Alright, but that was great, though. He finally got his medal. Come on.
We have different opinions about that moment. Because I'm like, why is that woman, that orange lady again, giving Chewbacca, an exclusively Chewbacca medal? Like, I get that it's a nod to A New Hope, but it makes no sense in the context of this movie.
Yeah, I totally acknowledge that, but I also think it's pretty great.
And also Lando's random child,
Yeah.
That was stupid, and they didn't explain it.
Yeah, and here's another thing that was weird. How Lando got all those ships to come rescue them at Palpatine's lair.
No, I have an answer to that. It's Lando.
That's true.
That's why nobody came in The Last Jedi, because
Lando
there was no Lando.
That Lando wasn't there,
And then Lando, won them over. I loved Lando. Lando was the highlight of that film.
Oh, Lando was fantastic in that film.
He was so good.
You could tell Billy D. Williams was just having a great time.
I loved his role. It was
he kept doing that.
It was so good. I love that. He's like, if you see Leia, send her my love.
That was a really cool line.
I love that. Like, he still has a thing for Leia after all these years.
Yeah, it was cool. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think I had some other cons. I just can't really think of anything right now.
You didn't like the light speed skipping thing, right?
Yeah. Oh god, the light speed skipping was so stupid.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so dumb.
Where did that enormous fleet of Star Destroyers come from on Palpatine's planet?
That was kind of dumb. What else?
I don't remember the movie very well, even though
yeah,
we watched it last
that's
week.
Another one we have to watch again.
Well, yeah, we do.
As far as pros, though, I will say I think overall, I know a lot of people really think it's the worst film. I think it's better than The Last Jedi.
I agree.
I liked pros.
It was more interesting.
I liked Palpatine. I liked Lando, even though, like I said, Palpatine's role seemed a little bit contrived. It was really cool seeing some other people pop up, like Wedge Antilles popped up. I did not expect that at all. Mm-hmm. That was kind of neat. Mm-hmm. We had a couple of other original series characters who. Oh yeah, well Nien Nunb has been through the whole thing, which has been
good old
cool.
Nien Nunb.
Yep, good old Nien Nunb. Let's see. Despite what everybody else says, for some reason, everybody hates the fact that Rey calls herself a Skywalker at the end.
I kind of liked it.
I don't understand what everybody had like. Do people really expect her to be like, I'm Rey Palpatine?
Yeah, I liked it. It was kind of like she identified with them. They influenced her life,
Yeah, and people were trying to, again, not trying to get too far into this, but people were trying to like throw identity politics and stuff into it. And it's like, what? Mm-hmm. Like I don't even understand where they're coming from with that. But regardless of that, I thought like it was kind of a nice way to bring it all back at the end. Was her going back to where it all started, and we're in Tatooine again.
Yeah, the double sun thing,
which was cool.
Great.
Yeah, the double sun was neat. And what else did I like? I liked all the visuals in the film. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
I loved this. It was cool that Luke, Leia, and Han were in it. Like Han had a kind of like a scene with Kylo, like a sort of flashback. Not flashback, but he kind of saw Han. Mm-hmm. That was another thing I liked. I liked how Ben turned back to the light side. I kind of saw that coming
Yeah, totally. I think some people didn't like that, but I thought, or didn't understand it, but I thought the motivations actually made sense. Like, I don't know if it was that he could sense his mother die and that kind of broke him, or whether it was that Rey chose to be kind rather than killing him. Instead, she healed him. Yep. Maybe seeing that compassion made him go good. I don't know. But either way, I liked it and it made sense to me.
That's what I didn't like in this film, was the stupid healing. That is that.
And how did Rey know she could do that? When that random worm was injured, she's like, I better go touch it and heal it somehow.
And then also, Ben then can do it.
And how did he know he could do it?
And then, since he was dying, why didn't she just use heal again on him?
Well, did he die because he gave all his energy to her to
Something
heal her?
Like that. I don't know. Yeah, it was really weird. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of people also didn't like that. When Palpatine died, they thought it didn't make any sense. Because he was like, if I die, my spirit will pass into your body and stuff. But he ended up kind of actually technically killing himself.
Yeah, you explained that and it made sense.
Yeah. He ended up killing himself because the lightning was reflecting back off of her lightsabers on him. So yeah, it ended up being that. I know that's one criticism of the film.
Can I mention a couple things I like?
Go ahead.
I like the whole part with C-3PO and how they have to kind of like reprogram him to get him to say what was on that blade. I just thought that was cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
I enjoyed it. Although C-3PO was a bit heavy-handed in the movie, like it was a little obnoxious at times.
Well, I appreciated them giving him more time because I'm pretty sure this is the last film that Anthony Daniels is going to play him as C-3PO. So while it could have been better, I think, and some of like his jokes were 3PO-ish, but some of them felt like a little off too.
Too much, yeah.
It got a little too much.
Some of them were Attack of the Clones 3PO.
Yeah.
I'm beside myself.
Yeah. Yeah. But I did appreciate they gave him a bit more of a role in this one because he. Another thing.
We needed more R2. Though.
Yeah, that's a problem I have with the entire trilogy is there was not enough R2D2.
We need more R2.
Yeah, but I do love BB-8. So what are you gonna say?
Another thing I thought was kind of cool was them going to the crash site of the second Death Star. Although I don't know how all those remains were there, given that it like quite soundly blew up at the end of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, that made no sense either.
But it was still cool to see the inside of it, and that moment where Rey saw herself as a Sith was pretty cool.
Oh, that was so cool. It honestly made me want her to turn to the dark side. It was cool. She had like the double Darth Maul blade. That was sweet.
Yeah. So that was cool.
The lightsaber fight between her and Kylo Ren was really cool. right after that part.
Yep. And oh, I liked the whole ending thing, like the whole I'm all the Jedi and all the Sith thing. Like I don't really know where that came from, but it was entertaining. I like that, like she almost died, and then like all the Jedi came to her, and it was like this cool moment with all the actors from previous movies. That was cool, you know.
I thought what would have been kind of cool, personally, would be, and I was fine with the ending, but I think what would have been kind of cool, and in a way where subversion would have been pretty interesting, was if they let her die and Ben lived. That would have been kind of interesting, but I also was fine with her.
I have no
the way it ended.
And also the thing with the whole all the Jedi and all the Sith thing is that's another thing that begs the question of why that never happened in previous movies.
Yeah, why didn't it happen to Luke?
Yeah, why did none of the other Jedi lend their power to previous
it was weird.
Jedis?
But I did like the scene because we got to hear Sam Jackson as Mace Windu. We got to hear Qui-Gon, Liam Neeson. Frank Oz was there. We got to hear Obi-Wan.
Got to hear Hayden Christensen.
Yeah.
I don't hate him.
And about
so
yeah, that's fine.
So that was cool, but did it make sense? I don't know.
I really wanted... One thing I'm slightly disappointed on, but it doesn't really take away from the film itself, was I kind of would have liked the scene between Anakin and Ben. That would have been kind of, in my opinion, that would have been a kind of cooler way to really have Ben...
Wait, what do you mean Anakin and Ben?
Like, Anakin as a Force ghost talking to Ben.
Oh.
That would have been a really neat way to kind of bring him back to the light side, because... Like, Anakin lived through turning to the dark side and then turning back to the light side. That would have been a cool idea to have, especially since it is, like, the end of the Skywalker saga. But I'm also fine with it him not having.
I kind of feel nothing about that, especially because, like...
That's just a personal thing that I thought would have been kind of cool.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I did like that they brought back Harrison Ford, though, and not just because it's Harrison Ford, but it was kind of a cool scene.
Yeah, it was. And yeah, overall, I don't know. I thought it was a good film. It was decent. It was definitely better than The Last Jedi, but it certainly has a lot of problems too.
Yeah.
I think there's probably some other things that I'm not thinking of right now personally, but overall, I thought the movie was pretty good.
It was entertaining.
I liked it. Yeah.
Once again, I just kind of wish they had done more with it. That's all. Like, I was just a little disappointed by the latter two films. Because I liked the first one so much, and I feel like it had so much potential. But they're still entertaining.
Yeah.
They're still probably better than the prequels, although the prequels are better in some ways.
I think that certain prequel films are better than... I would like, personally, to do a ranking of all the films. Again, like, re-ranking everything. But I think The Force Awakens is better than the prequels. After that, I always have a special place in my heart for Episode 1, and then after that, I have no idea. But yeah, overall, you know... What else? Any other thoughts, like as far as overall thoughts on the sequel trilogy?
Well, as I kind of alluded to, or touched on, didn't allude to,
mm-hmm.
touched on earlier, I think the main weakness with the whole trilogy is just that the story, like there's no... Like
there's no overarching narrative.
Yeah, the movies just don't flow together at all, and the story kind of was all over the place. Like, they really should have mapped out a strong story from beginning to end, and then it would have been a much better trilogy.
Yes, yes.
That's all, and that's something the prequels definitely have on the sequel trilogy.
And and the prequels also have where at least things make sense.
And the characters make sense. You get why they're doing what they're doing.
Yep,
yeah.
And there isn't like these like contrived kind of moments where you're just scratching your head going like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
I mean, the prequels have their own problems, and that could be its own video, but
they don't have that problem.
But they don't have some of these pretty big blunders.
Mm-hmm.
And my other problem, again, we talked about, is the pacing is too fast, I think, overall.
Yeah.
I think the big issue, I think you could kind of sum up the sequel trilogy as saying, in my opinion, it's all style, not very much substance, because visually, like I said, it looks fantastic, everything looks great, but like I said, there's just a lot of issues with the story and some of the characters and things like that. They are entertaining, like you said. Overall, they're entertaining films. They are Star Wars films. I still enjoy all of them, really, to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the lack of an overarching narrative is a huge problem, and it's so glaringly obvious the more you watch it.
And it wasn't even just the lack of overarching narrative. I just feel like the plot of the second and third one weren't that great.
They were all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, they just weren't the best that they could have been.
But and like you said, it's a disappointment because The Force Awakens really was a solid film.
I think it set it up well, yeah.
Yeah, it set it up really well, and everything looked good. And I remember being really excited after seeing it in the theaters. And maybe that was part of the problem with The Last Jedi, because I think a lot of people had really high expectations for The Last Jedi, and it just ended up really falling short of those expectations.
Well, why did they? That says something about
The Force Awakens
being a good movie.
I think overall for the entire Disney, and I'm not counting The Mandalorian or anything. We haven't seen The Mandalorian yet, but I'm just counting the movies. The first 2 movies they made, Force Awakens and Rogue One, are the best 2 movies, and they just kind of went downhill from there. And
I agree.
It seems, considering what Disney spent on the franchise, the amount of resources available to them in terms of writing, all that stuff, money, all that, there's no excuse why these films shouldn't have been better, you know, in my opinion.
Agreed. They should have gotten, like, the best of the best, like, had teams of people weeding out crappy plot ideas and stuff, you know.
Yep, exactly.
But, oh, well.
But I guess that's our thoughts on the sequel trilogy. What do you guys think of the sequel trilogy? Are we right? Are we wrong? Do you disagree?
It's subjective, but what do you think?
Do you disagree with us? Do you agree with us? Let us know in the comments below. And
if you have answers to some of our questions about why certain things happened, please tell us.
Or if you have any other criticisms that kind of went over our heads a little bit. I'd definitely like to see Rise of Skywalker at least more. Yeah. Because I'm sure there's probably more I could pick out and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm probably not going to watch these movies for quite a while. And one other thing I did want to say about the Star Wars franchise as a whole is, I remember after we watched the original trilogy recently, and it was the original versions of the original trilogy, unmolested, whatever you want to say. I remember thinking after Return of the Jedi ended, why did they continue this franchise? It should have just ended with these 3 films. But then we wouldn't have had all the prequel memes and all the other fun stuff.
Even, the special editions didn't need to happen.
No, none of it. Honestly, none of it needed to happen. The original trilogy, in my opinion, are so far above all the other films and all the other media in the franchise.
I agree.
That's just how I feel.
Yeah, and people give Return of the Jedi a hard time, but it was still way, way, way better than everything else that came after.
It kind of makes me go, okay, I kind of understand why George Lucas, after the prequel trilogy, was like, nope, no more Star Wars films, and then he sold it to Disney. And
maybe he realized that they were a huge mistake.
Yep, I guess so. But, alright guys, well that's all we have to say for now, and hope you liked the video, and until next time, may the Force be with you. And you too.
Indeed.
Bye.